Game begin.
Do you think here in New York City we haven't been trying to play a bunch of guys' blessings and make people's lives miserable by drawing a bunch of eggs? Maybe we did it with, oh, I don't know, a renewed faith instead of a tithe. But some of us have been trying to do this good work for many a moon to the degree that it was infected into the great state of Wisconsin. However, yes, I'm aware of your one absorb four foil deck. I just can't refer to it right now as I have no internet.
Okay.
Okay. Welcome to Spike Only Podcast, the deck touchingest podcast on the internet. I'm here with special guest Sam Black and my regular co-host Michael J. How is everyone doing?
I'm good.
I'm not as good as Sam. I did not just crack the internet in half by I don't know, gushing away all my own lands and then casting absorb with a stray Mox Diamond mana.
Yeah, I mean it sounds nice when you put it like that. I'm going to kick off this podcast with a customary sample hand of Sam Black's pre-modern playable list and interpret what it says about my future.
Ooh.
Deal
This is a
another
new
hand.
feature on our podcast?
Yes, this is actually a tradition in the pre-modern Discord is to open up this Moxfield link and deal a random hand of pre-modern playable cards and discern what your day is going to be like as a result of how good the hand is. I have dealt myself a hand. I have Tainted Field.
If this is
a
real,
darker
I
waste.
have no idea about it, and I'm very pleased.
Is this like tarot? Is this like
Yeah, it's like a tarot card reading. I mean, some people are just like, ooh, like, you know, just kind of, there's not much interpretation. It's just like, can my hand cast the spells that I draw, which is like pretty.
Are we now a witchcraft podcast? Like
We
when
certainly-
people are like Magic the Gathering, are we gathering some sort of magic perhaps around a cauldron bubbling with I don't know, bat's wings and
Well, since abandoning the
women's
practice,
studies?
since abandoning the practice of mathematics, we've had to turn to some forms of divining. And it sounds like this podcast is going to be Tainted Field, A Dark Our Way, Surprising Scary, Mishra's Helix, Gush, very appropriate for today, Goblin Matron, and Wirewood Symbiote. We have like 4 S tier pre-modern cards in this hand. We can cast almost none of them. We're hoping to draw
That's
a land.
pre-modern.
But
I would like to state for the record that this is not a deck.
no,
I
this
know
is
that's obvious, but
I mean, I don't see any cards that are banned in pre-modern here, so I believe that this is a deck. You are wrong. This is a deck. Like it doesn't have any anti cards.
I'm
So
pretty sure there are no cards that are banned in pre-modern. It would be weird if Moxfield let me add those while I was in the pre-modern format.
in the pre-modern
Filter.
world, indeed. But this has become a sort of daily tradition. You know, we all first thing in the morning we head over to the Wild Speculation channels in the pre-modern Discord and deal ourselves a sample hand of pre-modern playables list on moxfield.com/user/Samuel H. Black. So feel free to join in on the fun. Sam, of course.
I was actually wondering if we were gonna talk about like that project and related projects. I expected that the focus was going to be on my recent decks, but
I guess while we're on the topic, do tell us what the actual purpose of cataloging every playable pre-modern card is.
Yeah. So I had a friend who wanted to, who was considering making a purchase of 4 of every legal card in pre-modern, and was struggling with how to physically do that. He ended up like making a document that had everything he would want and tried putting it into a TCG player cart, which crashed his TCG player such that every time he tried to log into TCG player, it immediately crashed again. And then he reached out to some larger vendors to ask about, if they would assemble this form and what they would charge. And I think failed to get a concrete answer. And I thought that it would probably make more sense to not buy all of the cards that are very clearly never cards he'd want to do anything with and would just take up space and be annoying to purchase and sort. And so, partially for his benefit, I made a list of everything I thought he might ever want in pre-modern, roughly, um, so that he could just buy that list instead and accomplish 99% of his goals. Um, I did this by literally just scrolling through every card in pre-modern on Moxfield and adding cards as I noticed them as things that I'd thought of playing or heard people talking about playing or remembered being in any deck list in any format ever. And missed some things like Ravenous Rats because Moxfield showed me the portal picture that I didn't recognize at first glance. So this is my best effort on scrolling quickly on like a once over and then trying to add anything else as I notice, hey, wait, did I forget about that? Or someone tells me that it's missing. I would appreciate community feedback on, hey, I think this card's playable and it's not in here. Because my bar is if somebody says that, then they're like almost definitionally right.
I'm sorry. If somebody says what, they're almost definite.
If somebody names a card, then that means it is a card that can be considered to be played in pre-modern.
Somebody wants a card to be in the playables category because they have a deck that they think it goes in. That's like basically enough.
Yeah.
So from there, Zvi tweeted about how it was fun to like look at this list and try to think of like what I might have been imagining when I put like this card as playable.
Yeah.
And so that prompted me to go over the list and sort it into using the Moxfield features of sideboard and considering. Sideboard for cards that I couldn't really imagine putting in a main deck, but could imagine sideboarding, and considering for stuff that I felt was like pretty fringe. The considering, the line between considering and main is very loose. But I felt like it, likely helped to declutter the main. So then from there was actually like another reason that I was doing all of this, which is that I recently, so I made a list of an old school cube. And then I realized that the list of the old school cube was basically was approximately everything playable in old school. Not 1-to-1 because the cube wouldn't have like some sideboard cards that like are playable in old school and stuff. But I felt like the cube would give me a loose idea of how to space cards in a binder if I wanted to just have a binder of all of the playable old school cards so that I could like deck build old school out of that binder. And anything I didn't have, I would just leave space for because like it's a, the kind of binder that doesn't have pages you can remove and stuff. So it's like hard to like move everything around if you think of something else you want to add. So it was important to map it all out in advance. And then once I assembled that, I was like, I really like having this because this is a static format. Like what's playable in it isn't going to change. This binder can just like exist as a deck building resource that I have forever, and I can just like easily take stuff out of and put it back in its dedicated slot, and that'll make it really easy for me to like switch decks around if I'm like going to an old school event and I want to build some particular deck for it, because I don't play old school that often, or I don't play old school in such a way that I need a deck with real cards that often, but when I do, like there's a decent chance that I'll want to play something very different than the last time I played. And so it makes it really easy to have like exactly one deck assembled that is anything if I, get to the point where I just have like everything I might ever want to play in old school, which now that I have this binder to keep track of what I have and where it is and everything, I'm more likely to flesh it out over time. So then I was like, wait, this also works for pre-modern. Like it is also a static card pool that's like not that big, and I can get a binder that has like 400 and whatever slots, put a playset of unsleeved cards in each slot, and then, you know, if I have like the 480 most playable pre-modern cards, that'll cover like, you know, 98% of every card I would ever want to build a new pre-modern deck with. Especially
Sam,
if I
can you
like.
pause for a second? I'm just super engaged in this picture that you're painting to the degree that I would like to see a picture. Can you like take pictures of your like what this pre-modern binder looks like? And then my corollary question is, so you don't have a lot of decks built. You just have this resource that allows you to build decks on demand?
Well, so that's with old school. I have one old school deck built, and then I have a binder of everything else. And like the old school deck plus the binder is precisely one of every restricted cards, four of everything else, or aspiring to be that. Like I have 4 Swords Plowshares in my deck, so I don't want any Swords Plowshares in the binder. Pre-modern is a little bit different because I have like 4 to 6 pre-modern decks assembled, and then I also have the binder. And since I often want to have multiple decks that use some of the same cards assembled at the same time, it's like I less strictly want to have exactly 4 of everything like in my pre-modern collection. But I'm not going to have more than 4 of any of the same card in the binder at a time. And stuff that I know is in a pre-modern deck, I'm not going to like try to get into the binder. So I have actually physically assembled this binder. And it is, I have the binder assembled, and then I have a list of all the stuff that I'm missing from the binder. And then I have like some decks that cause other empty spaces in the binder. So I do have the ability to, you know, I could like potentially record a video of flipping through the binder or something. I would show it. I guess, I mean, the listeners can't see it, so it's really bad podcast material. But if I don't know if you can see the place where our video is right now, but I could flip through it right now if you wanted.
Yeah, I can see you. I can see you. I just have to lay my phone on its side because it's also my phone is also next to dead, and where I'm sitting,
I'll make the viewers
cord is very frayed.
Just a second.
This is just wonderful podcasting versus my usual setup. Sorry.
Sam Black is now holding up for the camera a sheet of uncut sheet of Wizards exclusive, clearly stolen card.
So
he's got like that binder page with like not a lot.
You know, trying to like
a Tithe, Tireless Tribe, Mother of Runes.
You're not going to
just naming cards.
I'm just looking at the cards that are on the page: Exalted Angel, Acroma, Eternal Dragon.
If you want to know what's in this binder,
you could just look at the playable list.
Playable documents. I have on my Moxfield a pre-modern binder list deck list. That is the thing that I used to sketch out this binder.
It is kind of beautiful to look at the pre-modern cards. You do have some like new frames in there, yeah.
Where I didn't own the pre-modern printing, I did, you know, do my best to just like fill it out with a card I could legally put in a deck.
Right.
So it's mostly pre-modern stuff, but not exclusively as far as like the printings.
Yeah, aspirationally you can, you know, replace with the new stuff. Well, this is all very interesting and almost kind of like sad, because now that I know what the pre-modern playables list is before, it no longer carries the mystique. And I don't know if my pre-modern playables horoscope is going to feel as meaningful now that I know that what it's for. But regardless, you should definitely make that video, because it's actually really, really fun to just look at all of the cards that are in pre-modern. Right now, the playables list has 545 main deck cards, 65 sideboard cards, and 254 considering. And there are some bangers in considering. We've got like Crystalline Sliver in here, Blinding Angel, a card that I have put in a deck, Ascendant Invocar, If Entomb ever gets unbanned, that's going to be in the Entomb deck. Meanwhile, in playables, Victimize somehow getting onto the team.
Victimize is in playables, but Lightning Angel, which has won a monthly, is in consider.
Top 8
I
in a
said
lobster
that the line
con.
is rough. I think Victimize is a bit of a banger.
I mean,
Yeah, Victimize really just snuck in with the rest of the squad. Just like, hey,
it
guys,
did
don't...
top 8 a lobster con. I believe that deck defeated me in the last round of Swiss. Nudge,
Lightning
nudge,
Angel or
wink,
Victimize?
wink.
Lightning Angel or Victimize?
Lightning Angel. Nobody's gaming with Victimize, Sam. You know, Adrian tried to make so many Victimize decks back in 1999, and they were all. You know, how Adrian always like makes decks that have what he perceives to be like a clever name. Like his decks would all be called like Just Another Victim version 2.1. Just Another Victim, and then it would be creatures that you would victimize might have a little benefit.
It's funny because Victimize is kind of like immediately identifiable as like the worst card on this list of playables.
Okay,
to
I
me,
can move Victimize to the considering.
to me at least,
Yeah.
it was actually kind of funny because I was like looking at the list. I'm like, okay, surely not all of these are playable.
Victimize is exactly the kind of card Lanny always wants to put in like Esper Bobs, right? Like it's a card that you can imagine being good enough. It's just like a little inefficient compared to like 3 or 4 other things for I don't know the exact same casting cost. But he's just like wraps his head around like, hey, if you glue a Withered Wayfarer to a Merfolk Looter, you're really doing it.
There's no ETBs in this format, so Victimize starts looking like not very good. But like I like the card like this it's like a creative card to put in like a cube.
Wait, what do you mean? There's tons of ETBs.
Not really exciting ones. Most of them are just kind of like draw a card or like very conditional FTK, right? But there's not like I don't know.
Lightning Angel's in the main, not the considering.
It's possible that Mike is mistaken because he didn't pull up the list.
I was just saying what I was just I don't even have an internet connection.
No, Blinding Angel is in the considering.
Oh, Lightning Angel.
Blinding Angel.
Oh, Blinding Angel. I thought you said Lightning Angel.
No, yeah.
So I assumed you meant Lightning Angel.
No, Blinding Angel is great. Red Green Ponza Oath cannot defeat a Blinding Angel.
Yeah, I think Fran had one in his sideboard after I told him that because you can oath it up and then they can never attack you with their Terrorvores, nor remove the massive 4 toughness of the Blinding Angel.
I mean, I would just like move half of these considering up just because I know for a fact that a lot of these have been sincerely placed into pre-modern decks. Some of them like quite good ones.
I'm now obsessed with making a Victimized deck. Like you would start with Yavimaya Elder, right? Like guys that have death triggers, right?
Get me out.
No, hear me out.
Once someone figures out like a pre-modern Scryings that would definitely have Eternal Witness.
Yeah.
Victimize with Eternal Witness.
I think Eternal Witness is sort of like universally agreed upon to be like a card that feels like it should be in pre-modern. So I'm in.
Well, I mean, okay. Do we put Victimize plus Yavimaya Elder in our Astral Slide deck? Is that what we're doing?
I mean, I don't really think our Astral Slide deck should be Abzan.
I kind of like Abzan for Astral Slide because then you get to slide your Ravenous Rats.
I love how we haven't named any cycling cards. Instead, I named Victimize.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think Victimize
in a card that gets basic lands.
I do think Ravenous Rats. Like I like the starting point of Ravenous Rats, Astral Slide, and Cartographer.
I dislike that starting point.
Well, if
they discard the card at the end of their turn.
No, but if you have double Astral Slide with the Cartographer, you're doing it, man.
Yeah. You
are doing it.
The question you should ask yourself is like, what situation in which you have double Astral Slide, like, are you being defeated by an opponent with like 2 cards in hand, right? Because if your Ravenous Rats card is just another thing, be it like if it's a Wall of Blossoms, right? Wall of Blossoms is in green.
Yeah, but like, obviously, you're already playing your 4 Wall of Blossoms, and you want Ravenous Rats as another thing to value slide. And then since you're on Rats and Blossoms, you can play a bunch of therapies.
Yeah. I mean, I can
I,
dig all of these things happening in a deck that doesn't contain the card Astral Slide or
I was playing
Cartographer.
the
Like, I'm
Rock
just like,
last week.
you're just describing, the next version of Pitless Rack or whatever, like a
I was
tempting
playing the
worm.
Rock last week, and I had the Duress Cabal Therapy draw against Wyatt Danger, who was on Elves. So Duress Cabal Therapy is at its nadir of how good it can possibly be. And I had like double Ravenous Rats, and he had 2 cards in hand at the end of a little back and forth. And I just cast one of my Ravenous Rats, and he discarded Squee Goblin Nabob that he had naturally drawn. And I was just like, Wyatt Danger. Wyatt Danger!
Yeah,
Every freaking time! And look at this stupid Ravenous Rats in my hand.
that's what makes him so good. But
Good.
so actually we talked ourselves into a deck that could contain Victimize and not Astral Slide, though, because like if your deck has 4 Rats and 4 Blossoms, and I guess 4 Yavimaya Elder, Victimize starts looking like a playable card.
And
We
some
don't-
hermits.
And a Hermit, right? But this
Look-
this deck is called the Rock, and it contains Recurring Nightmare, which is just what the
that's
card
why
Victimize is.
I was making
over
fun
and
of
over again.
Victimize because Recurring Nightmare is
Yeah.
quite a bit
Recurring
better.
Nightmare is
They
clearly.
cost the same amount of mana.
I will give you the Recurring Nightmare is generally a more powerful card than Victimize.
But
So,
you can only play 4, so
But you don't even want to play 3. So
yeah, exactly. Recurring Nightmare was a low key. The Victimize thing excites me slightly because Recurring Nightmare was really fun in the Arena Vintage Cube somehow, because every card in Cube now is a creature that makes tokens and ETBs, or ETBs, and like every creature is a Deranged Hermit and a Wall of Blossoms.
can we do some sort of nonsense by victimizing Priest of Gix and Anarchist? Can we do something with this? Is this a victimized sort of thing we can do? It gets 2 creatures, right? So if I get an Anarchist and a Priest of Gix, then
How does your
I get my
Anarchist
Victimize
return
back.
to the? You need a sacrifice outlet, but once you do, you're
Right.
cooking. Yeah.
Yeah, like
Well,
you just
isn't
have
my
bad
sacrifice
effects,
outlet the
an altar, and they're
Victimize?
dead.
The Victimize can only sacrifice a creature, but you need both.
Sorry, you have Altar of Dementia, and then they're dead, right?
Well, you also still need 2 Priest of Gix because. Oh no, because you can.
No.
Well, yeah. Oh, you.
No,
yeah,
no,
because
no,
you have
no.
to choose.
I'm
Victimize.
infinitely even.
Victimize asks you to choose 2 creature cards in your graveyard.
Oh, right. You
like-
need there to be another one around.
Yeah. So you need a second copy of something to do it.
You need a second
So-
of either one.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is I've already parlayed Priest of Gix and Anarchist, 2 cards that probably should be in the considering pile, maybe, not the playable pile, and
well,
I
so-
still don't have a reason to play Victimize.
Well, you're fine because as long as you have your sacrifice outlet, being Altered Dementia or whatever, and you cast Intuition, and your Intuition pile is Priest, Anarchist, and then you Victimize Anarchist Loop, then you're there. So it's a 3-card combo.
My God, I could have done this.
Victimize, Intuition, and Altar of Dementia. Luckily, these are extremely playable cards when you draw them on your own, so you won't have to worry thanks to your Priest of Gix in general.
Listen, we don't always have Sam Black, but I do want to say I played the Rock last week at League.
Why?
I played Fran's new list. I lost to Wyatt Stupid Danger like you do. It was a real close. It was actually a great match. I mean, he won. Usually he just raffle stomps me, but it was actually a great match only because he drew Kamal, a card that Landy doesn't want to play in Elves, and Kamal was the sole reason that he was allowed to continue to play Magic the Gathering. He killed me before I killed him by overwhelming Squirrel because he had Kamal double Guy's Cradle. But man, the Rock felt really good. I took apart Dreadnought in the first round, like absolutely picked it apart. I forgot why people thought the Rock was viable. Like Dreadnought is putty compared to the Rock, heads up. And then I won against Oath Stasis, and it was pretty fun. Anyway, that's it. I'm going to play the Rock again this week. It is the most fun I've had playing pre-modern in a long time, and I love playing pre-modern. I just had forgotten what it was like to play the Rock. You are just doing things every single turn, and every decision seems like it is titanic, because if you make even the smallest mistake, your opponent gets a 10 for 1, and you have no card advantage. All you do is have a Ravenous
You
Ray.
lost me at the end there, but I was like, if you want a deck where you have a lot of decisions every turn, have I got one for you?
No.
It has to be
Samuel H.
it has to be underpowered.
This one This one,
It has
like,
to be like
hey,
deliberately bad, so that you feel like a
sometimes you're
genius if you
looping
win a game.
ravenous
Are
rats
you
and
sure that doesn't describe
deranged.
my deck?
That might be true. That might
Okay,
be
so
true. I will say that the green-white version of the deck definitely put me in that place. Although I believe that the core decision point of the green-white deck, for my experience, turns out to be you should never cast mulch. You just you should
It is
just
certainly like I agree that like the main skill testing aspect of that deck, outside of understanding basic scroll rack operations, is like when do you cast mulch? Spoilers, you usually don't want to.
yeah,
yeah,
just
so
like
you
if
solve
you
this
think
problem
that
by
you if
removing
you
mulch
think
from your
that you
deck.
might
Yeah.
if you think you might hit greater than 0, I've got bad news from you. You'll hit 0 a lot. Like
So
you'll find that part of the curve.
so
But
Sam just cut mulch. All good.
yeah,
I did.
exactly. And that's
Yeah.
where we are today. So to bring our listeners back into this conversation, thanks for sticking with us through flipping through the binder and talking about Victimize.
Flipping to the binder was just like peak content, Lanny. I don't think you don't know what people want in life.
And you've only made it better. So
Optimized for audio.
Sam has. I mean, I guess we're just gonna have to do the YouTube release of this. Start doing video for the podcast.
I was, incidentally, as a podcaster, I was blown away by how many more like views I got on YouTube than on other like podcast
Other
platforms.
platforms. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I'm definitely surprised that anybody listens to the podcast on YouTube. But I guess I could see what happens if, like, instead of doing the podcast where you can listen to it, you can open it up on YouTube and then tab out and listen to it on YouTube. But also, if you want to
apparently
see
a
what
lot
our
of people
faces,
really want to do that.
yeah. But if you want to see our faces randomly, you can always click over to that. Not right now, of course, because Mike's Wi-Fi is down, so he's dialed in with his phone. But on any other day, that could be a pilot thing. If this is something that you want for the Spike Colony podcast, please leave your feedback in the
old
YouTube comments of this
episodes of,
video.
top level podcasts that I had YouTube on, and like there's like I don't think there's 500 views on like the biggest one, and the biggest top level podcasts were like tens of thousands of listens. So I don't know. Somehow the connection broke in the last 4 years because I was able to get all the embeds on Spotify when we relaunched, but my YouTube connection broke somehow.
YouTube is pretty fussy with how it processes podcasts in some ways. But in any case,
listen to top level podcast.
Listen to top level podcasts. 28 minutes. Spike Colony starts talking about Sam's deck finally.
Ambitiously.
Make that 28 and 30 seconds. Okay. For those of you who have not followed, Sam recently played Eternal Weekend with an sort of exciting green-white scroll rack mulch situation. This was sort of an interaction that keen listeners might remember as sort of like the Landy Hoth deck interaction originally, which was just kind of trying to find a way to build the Oath Parfait deck with mulch instead of land tax. Basically, the core idea of this is that step 1, you get 4 lands into your hand. Step 2, you activate Scroll Rack, putting 4 lands on top of your library. Step 3, you cast mulch, and then you pick those 4 lands back up. And step 4, you activate Scroll Rack again, and you're just like super happy. You have so many cards in hand.
Yeah, and
that
so I
deck
made this way more realistic by cutting Oath of Druid and adding Tithe.
Yeah.
Because Oath of Druids doesn't put 2 lands in your hand, but Tithe does.
Yeah,
It makes it way easier to get to 4 lands in your hand.
I think that was like definitely a huge difference. I mean, the land deck did this by just playing a huge amount of lands and lands with activated abilities, which at the time maybe it was like less of a Sabo's Web world. I mean, there's a lot of things that were going on different following the land tax ban. But regardless, that was the thing, and then kind of land just went into the what we know as Landy Hoth today, which doesn't contain Scroll Rack and instead plans to mulch replenishable enchantments into the graveyard. And then I guess for our listeners who don't know, going even further back, Sam was probably one of the most active land tax triggering and Scroll Rack activating pilots, especially in the United States. So both you and I have extreme fondness for generating tremendous value with Scroll Rack. I gave the green-white deck a spin. You had kind of had this observation that it was maybe logistically challenging to play in timed rounds, where maybe people might not, concede to you out of for one reason or another. Yeah, which is their entitlement. And that was actually kind of my first question is there anything about the blue-white deck that makes it more likely that my opponent will concede to me? Because it has even fewer ways to win the game.
And you're at Brush Hopper and added no additional win conditions.
Yeah.
So I think that'll help finish rounds faster.
Yeah, okay. Tell me more.
Well, you will beat them in a submission by Armageddoning more frequently because now you're blue.
Well, Armageddon is no longer in the deck.
Going more.
I did upgrade the deck by cutting the Armageddons.
Yeah.
Wait, you took the Armageddons out of this deck?
Yes.
Oh boy. I don't know, Lanny.
I realized that the Armageddons were basically there to cover the decks that I would need counterspells against in my green-white deck that couldn't have actual counterspells. And once I can just repeatedly draw into counterspells, I don't actually want to reset my mana, especially in a world where I am looping Factor Fictions. It turns out it's actually better for me if we both have lots of lands in play and I can just infinitely Factor Fiction into more foils and counter everything they do that matters and not hinder my ability to do that.
Did you add counterspells or are we still just 4 foil?
No, we're looping 4 foils and 1 absorb.
And can I get rid of the Abolish? That card is... I don't like the Abolish. Am I wrong? I should like it.
You can play a Disenchant. I have one Abolish and 1 Disenchant each in the 75, and I do not care which is main or which is sideboard. And if you prefer a second Disenchant to Abolish, you do you.
Why is Abolish good?
It doesn't cost any mana. And you have lots of planes in your hand.
Oh! Tithe Abolish is a combo deck. So instead of Splinter Twin, I can pay 1 mana to discard a card.
Mike's real question is why you're not playing Dismantling Blow instead, so that you can Dismantling Blow your own Sabo's Web. Abolish,
and I can hit my Sabo's Web with it, just putting it out there.
Yeah, that's
how I would do it.
No, I would rather spend the extra mana to just cast a Factor Fiction.
Right. So your original point is kind of interesting, which is that, despite the fact that you'll have Mox Diamond advantage on your opponent, if you just Armageddon them a lot of times, it is just easier for you to have 10 lands in play and cast 2 Factor Fictions in a turn cycle, continually blessing back your Factor Fictions and just kind of using that as your sort of...
Right. So what I did was I cut 2 Armageddons for the 4th Factor Fiction and the 4th Gush.
Right.
So that I would be better at just doing those things.
All right. So how many games did you win by concession and how many wins did you win by attacking with soldier tokens? Oh yeah, Sam won a tournament with this deck. The 24-player Swiss tournament in the
this deck is never finishing a league round. I'm just telling you right now.
Well, so it's very relevant that this deck has creatures in its sideboard. It has 4 Meddling Mages and a Masticore in the sideboard. In the finals, my second game of the finals, I cast a Meddling Mage on turn 2. I named Psychotog, and the Meddling Mage went coast to coast.
Yeah.
And Masticore did a very good job of soloing people. I basically haven't played Masticore in Pre-Modern before this, and it exceeded expectations. It beat Elves, it beat Mono Black multiple times, it beat Red. It did good work.
Yeah, I love a Masticore. It's I think there's kind of a little bit of, big question marks surrounding whether or not Masticore is good when you don't have Gaia's Cradle in your deck, basically, or just like, or I guess Tron, because those are the two places we've seen it is in Elves and Tron. And I have found that if you have 6 mana sources in play, it's kind of good enough.
Yeah. I mean,
Masticore. Oh, go ahead, Sam.
I was boarding it in against decks that have a bunch of creatures with 1 or 2 toughness, and I did not need very many lands in play to kill all of those forever.
Yeah.
Masticore is traditionally quite good in decks that had the card Thwart. So you just tap 4 lands, cast your Masticore. If they do something they can kill it, you thwart them, which now has the fuel to fuel the Masticore. And you're in a matchup that Masticore is good in. 2 lands might be enough to keep the Masticore alive and kill whatever you need to kill because you have free counter spells.
Yeah, so I don't have Thwart, but with Tithe, Gush, Deep Analysis, Factor Fiction, you're like pretty good at keeping it around, and even if you're like on 1 card a turn, getting to the point where you're not on 1 card a turn anymore.
All right. So, if the listeners haven't by now, headed over to moxfield.com/user/SamuelHBlack. Basically, the green-white Skorak deck was Mulch, Skorak, Wrath, Swords of Plowshares, Abeyance, Blessing, Mox Diamond, and then your win cons were Treetop Villages, and and your Brush Hopper, and a singleton copy of Decree of Justice, and you kind of just brought more like sort of enchantment and your sideboard cards, including an Exalted Angel. The blue-white version of this deck, I'll add another point, which is notably excluded from the green-white deck, was any enchantments like Sylvan Library,
right?
Or I guess Oath of Druids. The Gush Tithe deck. And Tithe. We've talked about Tithe, but I guess we should talk about Tithe after I talk about the blue-white deck. The blue-white deck just has foil, has Factor Fiction, had Armageddon, but no longer does. But and then also notably went from 4 Skoraks down to 1 Skorak. Has no Enlightened Tutor. So in many ways, it is a blue-white control deck that one would recognize. But it manages to not play nearly any of the cards that are in blue-white control decks. Like, you have Decree of Justice and Wrath of God and Factor Fiction and Swords of Plowshares. But like every other card is like there's no impulse. There's no counterspell.
AK. Counterspell.
Yeah. There's no accumulated knowledge type stuff.
Eternal Dragon, Exalted Angel.
Yeah, and there's no humilities or whatnot. There's no standstill stuff, and there's no tide combo.
No lands with activated abilities that don't generate mana.
Right. Exactly. No lands that are affected by Sabo's Web. So talk to me. I guess first talk to me about Tithe. I think there's kind of this is just a card that's probably been on people's mind. When they find out that it's legal in pre-modern, they're like, can I do anything with this? Should I be using it with Skorak? Should I be using it, I guess, with Abolish? You seem pretty happy. And of course, Mox Diamond. We've seen it in pre-modern in sort of like weird white weenie deck context where it's kind of an interesting card. It's kind of a strange card, I think, to have in a beatdown deck, but I guess I don't know exactly how it plays there. But my first reaction is, is this enough? Because there's 2 concerns I have. One is that Basic Plains is like not a card I like having tons of in my deck, not a card I like having tons of in my hand, sometimes my opponent has fewer lands than me for the entirety of the game, or they're capable of keeping it that way.
Yeah, so 1 mana draw 2 is like pretty busted in this format. And then the trick is just to get to a situation where 2 planes both count as cards. The way that this deck is trying to do that is by playing 4 Mox Diamond and 4 foils, so that I can discard the planes in spots where I would want to discard a card, and the planes is as real as any other card at doing that thing. And then also I can play a slightly low land count for a control deck, especially a control deck with Mox Diamond, and get the extra land drops off the Tithe. Also, Scroll Rack, of course, once I have that, then the 2 planes are very easily converted into other cards, and the tithes in my deck are additional shuffles. So, and then obviously, like, having a bunch of planes, like if you're trying to cast like Wrath of God, isn't that bad. And then as far as the like, you might have more lands than them, like having Mox Diamond and Gush makes that less likely. Also, Trevor's Ruins, also fetch lands. And then, kind of the dream scenario is you go turn 1 on the draw, just like turn 1, Mox Diamond, discarding your planes, cast Tithe, find 2 more planes, play planes. Or on the play, you could go Mox Diamond, fetch land, pass. They play a land, you crack your fetch, you cast Tithe in response to the fetch. So,
well, Sam, anytime you have the same number of lands as your opponent, where one is a flooded strand and the other one
yep,
is a plains, you have the opportunity to make the 2-for-1 play, right?
correct. It's just that you can do
So
that on turn 1 with the Mox Diamond. You can do it on turn 2 if you just like are on the play and you just go turn 1 planes, turn 2 fetch.
how often are you not playing a land to turn on your tithe, or how often are you tithing just for 1 planes?
Pretty rarely to both of those. Like you just play your lands, and sometimes you don't cast your tithe until you gush or whatever.
Okay.
And but like I don't know, there are other times where like you have enough lands to operate and you like want to hold them in your hand for scroll rack if you have your scroll rack, but that's pretty rare since there's only 1 scroll rack in the deck.
So I think my follow-up question would be like, Sam, if I have tithe, Mox Diamond, and foil, and I've cast all those cards, I actually have not gained any card advantage. In fact, I still think I might be losing card advantage. So how are we playing this control deck with cards like foil and Mox Diamond, which are card negative?
Well, you've discussed a situation where you have developed your mana base and stop your opponent from developing threats. So you should be in a pretty good spot to resolve a Fact or Fiction or Gush and then pull ahead on cards.
Okay. Also tell me a little bit about the sort of dynamic of you kind of have all these free spells, or you have like these free counter spells. And I think a lot of everyone's experience with foil mostly just comes from playing against Dreadnought, and the way I tend to think about foil, I guess, is just like, okay, well, I want to either be doing like this big turn, which is sort of like the Dreadnought thing, or the Grothog thing, where I'm going to be like, gosh, Armageddon with foil backup. What does foil look like when you're playing just a control deck, like just a deck that I mean, it already you have 25 instants here. It already feels like you're passing the turn with your mana up, anyways. You mentioned that you have a high quality. You mentioned that you have a high quantity of planes, so that's kind of in your primer, which is on Will's Patreon. You mentioned having a high quantity of planes and wanting to start with planes and wanting to start with Tithe pulled you away from a card like Counterspell. I think my kind of follow-up question on that was like, isn't it also sort of difficult to play foil in the first 1 or 2 turns of the game, before you've kind of found a gush and or set up like the cards that you really want to discard to the foil?
Well, because you don't have Counterspell, there's no pressure to play Island as your first land drop outside of Gush. And you do have Tithe and Sword Plowshares, so there is pressure to play Plains as your first land drop. So if your opening hand is like Island Plains Foil, you just play the Plains first. And there will sometimes be like a turn where you go shields down because you like play your first island before playing your second island to turn on your Gush, which like returns on your foil. But your opponent also doesn't know like when that shield is down. And it's also like, you can usually decide like what turn you think it's safe to do that.
Sam, can I interrupt you about some just like interjecting questions about the operations of how to handle the deck? Because I think like it's probably kind of confusing insofar that you're playing mostly cards that either people know what they do, like they know what a Tithe does, even if they've never cast one in pre-modern, or they're very familiar with, like everybody who's played competitive pre-modern's played against foil, right? But not in a deck with 8 planes, right? Like, so this deck has 8 planes and 2 Travis runes to go with its foils. So, from what you've said so far, it sounds to me, and tell me where I'm being inaccurate, please, that you just play like a regular deck kind of in the early parts of the game. Like you make your land drops. You might have to think about which land to play first, but like you said, because you don't have counterspell, you don't have pressure to play a lot of islands before you play your planes because you do have swords to plowshares. Um, but then, like at some point in the middle of the game, not even the middle of the game, like a couple turns in, you start doing sort of these resource disadvantageous things that end up, but they're like good effects that you would want, like you draw two cards, you counter a spell, etc. But they're kind of resource disadvantageous. But then as the game stretches longer and longer, your draw engine is so powerful that because of Gaia's blessing and so many gushes and factor fictions that you recoup any amount of resource disadvantage, and then you kind of start doing it all over again. Does that
So
sound right?
basically, yeah, like basically your like power curve is like you're really, really good in the first two turns when you know, have a full hand, like you have as many resources as your opponent, but yours costs less mana. Like you're gonna trade up on mana with foil, you're gonna trade up on mana with swords plowshares. You're like your opponent can't get under you early. Then you have hit like a brief power level dip where maybe you've like 2 for 1 to yourself or 3 for 1 to yourself to answer a thing. But if as long as you can survive that brief dip, then you reach the point where you're like casting card draws spells and pulling like, you know, worlds ahead. And then as the game goes longer and you start actually triggering Gaia's blessing, now you have like, you know, the like deck that is much better than a starting deck can be, with like more cards in your hand and like all of your, like anytime an effect says draw a card or draw 2 cards, it's like much better than that effect is in a deck that has not triggered a Gaia's blessing.
Right. This is
So
this is one of those kind of effects that's a little bit hard to place when you're just kind of looking at a deck on paper and like, and you're only speaking in terms of card advantage. You know, essentially the text draw card is not all things held equal when it's a land still deck, which eventually is going to draw all of its lands and or all of its cards period, versus a Guy's Blessing deck, which, you know, sort of progressively, you know, that fourth factor fiction is in fact much stronger than the first factor fiction.
right, and it's not just I don't run out of my 5 counter spells. It's literally all of my cards that say draw 2 cards or that are factor fiction. Like that is like that effect is literally stronger on turn 8 than it was on turn 3.
Right. So the friction that I was trying to get at was basically just like, I really hate casting, like, you know, all the foils that I've cast. Anytime somebody's like turn 1 Goblin Lackey and you have to foil it is like, you know, has just been generally bad because you're like put so far behind on resources, and, you know, discarding the land is non-trivial in your opening hand, right? If your opening hand contains 3 lands and you use one of them for a foil, the likelihood that you're going to hit your 4th land drop on 4 so that you can factor fiction to refill, and the fact that one of them is an island also makes your ability to gush later on a little bit harder. Like that's kind of the tension that I was getting at, combined with the sort of general lack of things to do with your mana that you've unlocked by casting foil. I mean, that's kind of the toughest bargain with foil, right? Which is that you have this card that lets you, you know, do more stuff for free, but because you're discarding an island plus another card, you're like, your mana is going to be less developed, and you'll have done fewer. You'll have one fewer card that you can cast out of your hand with your mana, anyways.
There's another thing going on here that I think is very non-intuitive. So I'm just going to guess something, ask Sam if I'm right, and then kind of like come full circle on it, which is that, Sam, because your deck only has 4 Mox Diamonds and 2 Trevis Ruins, I'm wondering that what percentage of the time you actually cast Gaia's Blessing versus getting Gaia's Blessing triggered by casting Intuition or Factor Fiction. I would guess that there are many games where you do more triggering than you are. Actually, not games, like I would guess on average you're doing more triggering than casting. Is that
right?
Is
Like
that...
both of these things happen in the course of a game that you win, but you're definitely like the Gaia's Blessings. Like plan A for them is not to spend green mana. Like the deck is built so that you can spend green mana if this thing gets stuck in your hand, but most of the time, you know, in the very late game, you're never doing that because you're just using Scroll Rack to get rid of it and then triggering it the other way. And like in the early game, you often don't have green mana. Although, I mean, you are drawing a lot of cards. You're prioritizing. You know, like not like you have the green mana. You know, not infrequently or anything.
But I
But
think the important thing also though is because of triggering Gaia's blessing, like we mentioned Adrian before. Like Adrian was an obsessive Gaia's blessing player in the '90s, and he was always just like, I just want to make my deck perfect with Gaia's blessing, right? You actually don't want to make your deck perfect. You want to put islands and planes that you have discarded back into your deck so that now when you draw the tithe that you have just also put back into your deck, there are planes to go get with it.
correct.
Right? Right. So like I think that's very non-intuitive when people
Right.
think
You want
about a
all
deck
the
with this much
islands
deck
to end up
touch.
on the battlefield because then you can still foil with them by using Gush, or you can just hard cast foil at that point. But you want the planes to mostly not be on the battlefield and just be looping between your library and your hand and sometimes your graveyard.
Okay,
I'm
so
very, very familiar with playing and fetching planes versus islands because, as longtime listeners know, I once won a meetup where I played Sam's um, Gush-based land tax deck because it was good against Lanny's favorite deck at the time, which was regular Parfait. And I won the meetup, and Lanny monkey tilted because I played the wrong land. He said, "You're so dumb. Why would you play plains instead of island?" And I was like, "I don't know. I've never played this deck before." And he's just like, "You can't gush with the plains in order to continue to trigger land tax against me." And I said, "I guess I'm super dumb, like Saproling Genesis for 100. Can you beat this?" And he was just like, "No." And then I attacked it for 100.
and it was a good learning experience for me because that is how I then turned around and unintentionally drew into the top 8 of the LobsterCon that year. So for people who maybe don't understand control, whoever they may be, I feel like this deck doesn't like. Is this deck going to be like a not die removally deck? Were there like kind of weird play patterns that this deck felt like it did more often as compared to what a landstill deck might play? There's kind of the flip side of kind of what I was saying is just my general excitement over not having to play mono 2 casting cost spells, which has made like the curve is basically one of the most like horrible parts of Standstill, where it just sort of doesn't really generate tempo almost ever until casting Wrath of God. When I look at this deck, one of my things is just like, how does this even begin to why does this work? But also just like, is there kind of any emergent properties like once you finally got your hands on it? Because also you have played 8 total like matches with this deck, right? So
yes,
yeah,
that is still true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like this deck doesn't use mana like a pre-modern deck, right? This deck uses mana like a legacy deck or something. Where like my curve is very, very low and I have a bunch of free spells. And, the things that I need to spend like real amounts of mana on are basically like Factor Fiction and Wrath of God. Like some things I want to talk a little bit more about the thing that I was saying earlier about kind of this deck's like power level across turns, where like you're a super powerful deck. Like your turn 1 is great, your turn 2 is great, your like turns 3 and 4 might be a little bit weak, and then after that you're like strong again. I want to point out that like Wrath of God obviously does a ton of work catching up against a lot of decks in those turns where you're weak. And the fact that like you don't have to tap out with regard to your counterspell access to Wrath of God is significant. And then also, in some matchups, while you're in your like weak phase, you can just like upkeep abeyance to like stop them from doing a thing before you're like ready to engage with the kind of things your opponent's trying to do.
I see. So there's kind of a specific class of, decks that activate abilities or cast instants or sorceries that on turns 3 and 4 that you're able to use the the unerrated mode on abeyance almost. that was kind of like the other thing. I almost was going to be like, oh, well, having foil as your primary counterspell is super awkward because, you know, the best thing about counterspell is that you can have two in your hand and you can hold up double counterspell and kind of be really efficient in doing double counterspell, and holding up double foil is a lot more difficult. You kind of need gush, you kind of, you know, you need a full grip, that kind of stuff. But Abeyance kind of lets you become double counterspell, you know, when you want it to be.
Right. Like
Yeah.
you might think on its surface that like the control deck with 5 counter spells and like, you know, 4 of them are foil is going to be at a huge disadvantage against like the control deck, you know, against like regular standstill or something. But abeyance is just massive in these spots. Like your opponent can never let it resolve basically at any stage of the game, especially like if they don't know if you have Geddon in your deck or something. And
Sam, might it
uh,
be advantageous to have 1 or 2 Geddons in the sideboard for control matchups? Like you could just wait until you have 3 Abayances in your hand and then absolutely raffle stomp your opponent.
I don't think that that is more powerful than a card like Deep Analysis or Library of Lang to improve your control matchup.
Did you play against much like blue-based control in the tournament?
I played against Psychotog in the finals, and I played against Stasis in the top 8.
Is Stasis an
so
easy or difficult matchup?
It is interesting, but I think ultimately pretty easy because of your sideboard. Like basically, you know, that my Stasis opponent commented on how like against, you know, he knew that I had a bunch of Aura of Silences in my sideboard, and so like usually against that card, he wants to like get away from Stasis and get away from Black Vice and like pivot strategies. His pivot
like
is
play brain freeze.
right. And so the problem is like he's stuck where he can't pivot into brain freeze, so he has to try to beat me with Stasis and Black Vice. But my deck is very good at like discarding cards. Like I can have a small hand if I'm trying to have a small hand, you know, for a decent portion of the game. Like obviously I'm bringing in a bunch of card draw. Like I'm not going to be able to stay small forever, but like foil and Mox Diamond and like Scroll Rack just being a card that you can get out of your hand and stuff give you like a decent starting point against like not dying to an early vice. And then if I just have a bunch of like destroy artifact or enchantment effects that I'm finding and like looping, and I can like, you know, cast Abeyance and then cast Abolish or whatever, like they're not going to be able to keep a stasis or a vice in play.
Yeah, Abeyance is just kind of a very uncomfortable card for a stasis deck to play against because you know,
right.
they want to they would have to conceivably mana short you in response to Abeyance, which doesn't affect the card Abolish.
Right. And then also I have 4 meddling mages. And
Yeah.
so like I can just meddling mage Chain of Vapor, and now their deck barely works.
Yeah.
So
but are we not exceptionally poor to Black Vice in game 1?
I think that they are advantaged in game 1, but I think that they have roughly no plan in game 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do we just concede game 1? I'm trying to figure out how I can finish a round with this deck. Right? Like,
I mean,
I'm confident I could play it well, actually.
right.
And
So
I don't know if I could finish a round.
Yeah, so you can certainly, like, if things start looking bad, like if they have a vice and you don't have an answer, like you can concede pretty early against them in game 1. And then, like, it doesn't take very long to just, like, cast a meddling mage name.
Games 2 and 3 are like pretty
attack.
easy from the meddling mage deck against stasis as far as like round time is concerned for the most part. Obviously they kind of, you know, they can have powder keg. I guess they can have essence flare in this brave new world that we live in.
Right, but these are both things that you can disenchant before they can kill the meddling mage.
Yeah.
I mean, but we're just going to get around with guys blessing. I'm actually not that worried about that. I'm actually just worried about, like, you know, just being able to finish 3 games, because if I were to lose game 1 and I tried to win game 1 for 20 minutes, but before I decided I was going to succumb to these vices, that's a very different story than if I have like 50 minutes to win games 2 and 3.
Yeah. The reason why I kind of asked about the blue deck matchup is it feels like when you are so I mean, thank God you have 4 Fact or Fiction and 4 Gush now, and so having 2 Armageddon, but it feels like a blue deck would be able to attack your card advantage and make your foils look substantially worse. But I suppose this problem is sort of remedied by just boarding in deep analysis, which at that point,
like the fact that I side up to 3 deep analysis to pair with my foils and my intuition makes it really, really hard for another blue deck to like compete with me on card advantage.
Yeah. Do you feel like the ability for intuition to force a Gaia's Blessing trigger is like a meaningful, like a sort of,
it's not an accident that the deck is playing 1 intuition,
right? But I guess I would say like, okay, how much of your intuition value comes from the text printed on the card, and how much of it comes from like triggering Gaia's Blessing, in spots where
most of the time that I cast it is to trigger Gaia's Blessing.
Okay, that's very interesting.
When we were testing 23andMe a little bit, like there was the advantage of the deck is in Gaia's Blessing in a lot of matchups, right? But you get to these late game situations where Factor Vision becomes a must counter card, because if you flip over a Gaia's Blessing, there's no piles they can make that allow them to win the game. That's why Mashlegs was saying, when he was doing commentary after playing it in those Wisconsin streams, like it was just the best Factor Fiction deck he'd ever played. It's possible this is an even better Factor Fiction deck for the same reason. But I think like if you're a control deck and you're trying to Morzi's Sam's deck, you have to save counterspells for the Factor Fiction and Intuition, because it seems to me from the outside looking in that the whole matchup is about Gaia's Blessing.
Yeah, right. I mean, if I was like a blue Tide deck or like a Dreadnought that had sideboarded into Tithe, like I would probably, go after lands and go after Factor Fiction out of policy. Like this is generally like the way that the Dreadnought deck, at least I know for a fact, operates like this in post board against blue-white control style decks. And then
the thing is, in order to go after anything, you actually have to be going after Abeyance.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's absolutely true. But I think that's, your ability to do that is pretty reasonable when you're like, when you're like a Dreadnought deck that has pretty good engines and pretty good card selection, and is also maybe able to make kind of work around, like, I guess, I don't know. Let's see. You have 4 Swords of Plowshares and 2 Wrath of God, right? So you kind of
3 Abeyance.
Yeah, well, I would just be. I mean,
like Abeyance against Dreadnought.
The level plus level thing would just, the Dreadnought player would never have Dreadnought in their deck against this deck, basically.
Well, what's their plan then?
It would be like Tide and Mishra's Factory.
Oh, but how do you? I mean, isn't Tide really bad against like Abeyance plus Aura of Silence?
I think that it's, you would have to kind of figure something out for that, but or it's like
jam land.
you're willing to, like, you do have your own 8 counter spells, so you're able to, at least have like.
I think if they don't have Dreadnought and they're never beating me.
Yeah, I mean, it's what I think makes the most sense from that perspective. Like, maybe like if you also have Meddling Mage, that makes things. I mean, I wouldn't try to cast Dreadnought against a deck that has triple Abeyance, 4 Swords of Plowshares, and 4 Meddling Mage.
Yeah, I
really.
agree.
I think you have to try to jam. You can't win. You can't win against the way that you beat Abeyance decks with Swords of Plowshares and Disenchant is by jamming.
The thing is, I would put a little bit more stock into the, like, turns, like, fourth, like the mid game. Like, I think this power curve usage is very interesting, because it kind of helps with visualizing that there are games that there's a portion of the game that exists between the early game and the late game. And a lot of times, a deck that has to cast Factor Fiction or Gush will either not have cards or not have mana to do certain things during that time. And like, those are around the times where, like, you can do something impactful. Like, this is like, a lot of not like blue base, a lot of like decks that aren't like Enchantress or blue base control decks have often lost to Dreadnought because of, you know, the Dreadnought deck having like accumulated knowledge. So just like drew maybe 3 extra cards, then the mid-range deck around, you know, turns 7 and 8, at which point, even if the mid-range deck is holding, you know, double Swords of Plowshares and a Pyroblast or a Disenchant or whatever, like the Dreadnought player is able to easily defeat that. So the way the Dreadnought deck, when it became the Tide deck, would beat blue-white control is basically the same idea, which is just that, like, if you counter Fact or Fiction, then you're playing a pretty lopsided game. And I can see how that might be different.
Like, my deck doesn't, like, the way that my deck interacts with like having free counter spells instead of counter spell, and then the way that lets me become a deck where I'm just like tapping out to like jam Meddling Mages and Aura of Silences, makes it basically impossible for Dreadnought to have a realistic strategy in, you know, the like after turn 2 stage of the game against me, where I think they have to
other
jam
than jamming, right, Sam? They have to try to.
Right,
jam.
well,
It's not great. They have.
You're like, don't get me wrong. I think that, you know, you have access to those 7 cards in, you know, the early game, plus whatever backup you might have in the form of foil and gush foil combination, or like you can obviously power them out with Mox Diamond. But, you know, I wouldn't say that, you know, those are things that are like the script is inevitably going to play out of that. Like, I agree that it's a more difficult game for the Dreadnought player if,
my
you know, for
conclusion
instance,
is basically that like the cards in my deck are so good against the cards in their deck that the longer the game goes, the bigger advantage I have, no matter what their plan is. And so they need to make the game end as soon as possible.
But the problem with the take out all my Dreadnoughts and try to play Parallax Tide as my primary source of victory is that is a fine strategy if that's Trump, but it is literally irrelevant against a deck that has the card Abeyance in it. So, like, if I'm going to pick a fight,
no, I mean, you still have to put
fight.
You still have to put it together with Abeyance. So you have to have the Abeyance and you have to have the Disenchant. So, like, again, these are like,
no, I could just Abeyance and resolve a counterspell. Like, then your Tide doesn't.
Right. You can have Abeyance foil, right? That's like
now you've got Time Walked already. Like,
the other thing is, like, they have to like get this. They have to get to the point where they can cast Tide, which is actually a tall order because I get to just put additional Aura of Silences onto the battlefield, and I also get to put Meddling Mages on the battlefield. So, like, it's just never happening.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more like just like I would just like lever down, like, because your deck has no card selection. Like, I would like lever down on your, you know, your reliance on.
What do you mean my deck has no card selection?
Well, it doesn't have like you're gonna see 7 cards plus however many gushes you cast, right? If you find if we're talking about like a turn 2 Meddling Mage or a turn 3 Abeyance.
Okay,
but
I'm the one who
Tide fight is on turn 6. He has plenty of time to get to Abeyance.
Right.
That,
like, it might be on turn 7.
The Dreadnought player doesn't sit on their hands. Like the whole like. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills here. Like, it's still a Xerox deck. Like, it's still a deck that sees is going to see 20 cards in the first.
I mean, do you think?
Yeah, but your catalyzing card is 4 mana. You can't pick a. You can't do the gush thing. Catalyzing card.
Clearly, we won't. We're
not a plan.
It's not. I mean, that's just not the play pattern. Like that actually happens. Like, I actually kind of need more.
Wait, how often do you think Dreadnought gets its 6th land into play on turn 6?
I mean, very often. The whole like concept of the deck, you know, after last year is predicated on this idea. You just like play 18 lands, you have enough cantrips to hit your land drops, and you know that's basically the path that you take. And it would be 5-on-5 or 4-on-4 if you're hedge drown stifle, right? I mean, I'm not saying we're going to put together like Gush Foil, Parallax Tide, Stifle on turn 4, or if that's even good, of course, because you wouldn't have lands to exile, and your ability to gush back islands.
The other issue is, like, let's say that they manage to do this, which I think is fantastically unlikely. What does that get them? Like, I still have 2 Mox Diamonds and a bunch of free cards in my hand. Like, how did they win?
Well, it's, you know, the collective like idea would be to like, you know, have card, like you would bring Powder Keg in against Mox Diamond, that kind of stuff. I'm just saying that I think that, you know, how a successful plan is, again, I haven't played the matchup. I'm just talking about like it from a blue white controls perspective, and like the phenomena of it happening against blue white control was, fueled by the fact that Dreadnought, and especially now Dreadnought with AK or Flash of Insight, was like still able to have spots, especially with like containing the opposing card advantage, where it could basically get around some amount of interaction with Tide. Like
Containing the opposing card advantage is a coherent concept against blue-white control, but is not a coherent concept against my deck. Like, you're talking about containing card advantage against 1 intuition plus 3 deep analysis plus 4 gush plus 4 factor fiction plus scroll rack plus library of Lang, where like, and then also the Gaia's blessing, and then also the abeyance. Like, that's just a completely different world.
Well, no, I mean, like if you're following, like I understand your position, but if you're following along with this idea, right, it would just be like, okay, like you would counter the first factor fiction, and then your ability to Tide combo them would sort of contain
that's not how the game would play at all, Lanny. It doesn't matter what the Dreadnought deck does. Like you're fixated on this idea that what do you think the chances are they're going to have 6 mana on turn 6? What if they never miss a land drop? They cannot pick a fight until they catalyze with a 4 mana spell. They've already lost if that is a true statement. You can't pick a fight with a 4 mana spell against a deck with abeyance. Like, you will always lose if that's your plan.
I mean, again, I just don't think like that. I don't really think like an always lose or always win, because like I've played matches of Magic. I mean, this is like
not
kind of basically
decks that have both abeyance and Gaia's blessing. You have no way to win the game.
I understand what, like, how you're thinking like that. That's just like, I'm just saying that I have an imagination for how this goes, because like, when the Tide deck was, I mean, I am describing, you're just saying that it is equally unlikely not to happen, as I'm saying that
it's not applicable against decks with these cards. Like, those
right, but you're again, Mike, you're just doing the thing where you're just like, I always have this in my hand, and I understand like you're going to have like certain cards in your hand that are useful like some amount of the time, but like, again, the texture of like these blue mirrors or whatever, like, is that there are some points in the game, like, the Dreadnought versus Stasis was kind of an example of this, because Dreadnought would turn into a tie deck against Stasis, and that'd be the same kind of thing. They would have like Thwart, and they had Gush and Foil. Stasis decks obviously run the gamut, and there's no core.
Let me jump in. First, I'm not sure what we're talking about. Is the debate about what the correct strategy for the Dreadnought player is, or is the debate about how likely the Dreadnought player is to win?
I mean, I wouldn't engage in a debate about how likely it is to win, because that sounds like math to me, and I'm no longer interested in that. But also, I wouldn't be able to make an educated enough guess, because I don't know what the play patterns are. Like, I think but this is kind of my initial observations, right? Like, one of the things that happens when you don't play like Ports and Impulse in your deck is that on turn, 3 and 4, you have less agency around the cards that are in your hand, right? That's kind of like
so let me continue. That's a big deal if some of your cards are better than other cards, and you need to find the good cards. My position is that basically after sideboarding, every card in my deck is unbeatable for them, and it doesn't matter what I have. I'm going to just like, the cards in my deck all line up super well against all of the cards in their deck. Like, I either have card draw, which you say that they're trying to stop me from resolving, or I have like Meddling Mage and Aura of Silence, which I also don't really understand how they're beating. But another dynamic that I want to talk about with this deck versus any blue deck is, I feel like the way that my deck works, where in the blue matchups, I'm pretty good at like making the game be about like Morsies on some level, is that the more card selection cantrips they have, like the more opt, portent, impulse type cards are in their deck, the more advantaged I am, because it's just like, oh, this is just like one less thing in your deck that I have to care about. Like, when I was playing
more it's just the Enchantress thing, yeah, you're just like naming Psychotog with Meddling Mage. So I understand. I think like the sort of follow up, like the kind of question of that is just sort of like, okay, how is that possible, right? Because I think that there's kind of a you basically said it right, which is just kind of like, oh, the one element of cantrips is selecting for, you know, a deck that might be better than another. Like, what do you feel are like the things that are contributing to your ability to be this like sort of no bad cards deck? Because fundamentally, I think that
Wait, let me answer that question.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. The thing that allows me to have this like no bad cards deck is the fact that my deck has so many card draw spells. Like, I'm cantrips and draw twos, and that makes me really, really good post board against everybody because I get to like you can kind of think of it like Dominion, where you just have like cards that say like get an extra action, draw an extra card, and then you have all these like cantripy things, and then you have some like stoppers. It's also like a fluctuator where like
Yeah,
everything in your deck
every deck is
cycles,
fluctuator if you think about it.
and then you just choose like what are my things that don't cycle, what are the stoppers. And for me, I get to tune either like all of my stoppers are creature removal, or all of my stoppers are enchantment removal, or all of my stoppers are like meddling mage, aura of silence, like stuff that like makes my opponent's deck like not work.
This is
And
Lanny, this is exactly gear two, right? So if you look at how the red deck sideboarded in Modern when I was good at Modern, right? Like, people don't understand how come I never lost to fair decks. And you're just like, that's because Mike plays red like the Rock. Like, every card in my deck, if I drew it, was a 3-for-1. So as long as I'm not mana screwed, I 3-for-1 you on every exchange. Like, you can't possibly win. So like I think Sam's saying the exact same thing. Like, every card, like, I'd never draw a lot.
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand the thesis.
So
I'm trying to piece together the picture of like how it's supported by, kind of like the cards like in the deck, because I think that there is probably, any skepticism would come from the idea that, the first thing that you pointed out, which is like, oh, the deck that only has 5 counter spells, or, kind of similarly, a deck that has just 4 Swords of Plowshares and 2 Wrath of God. It's like kind of like, if I'm a deck that has creatures, this isn't like a creature hate package that I haven't encountered. So if I'm like, elves, for example, I wouldn't feel particularly endangered. So like, I would be like looking for like, okay, like how did you alter like that sort of dynamic, or like what kind of are the other interesting like things at play, when considering like how this deck would work against decks that, are maybe capable of, say, deploying 5 or 6, maybe 4 or 5. I don't know. That sounds kind of high, but like 4 or 5 things that you need to, you want to interact with, in the first 4 or 5 turns of the game.
it sounds like you're describing a situation where, like, basically in this matchup, in this draw, I'm on Wrath of God or bust, but if I have Wrath of God, they lose.
Okay. So it's just kind of like Plowshares your lackey, but then you have War Chief, so you don't have second Plowshares, and then they can kind of get you if they do that. Or they get a Ringleader, and then they can kind of stay both gassed up and tempoed up while you sort of don't have the Wrath of God, basically.
Yeah, I'm much... Mike?
I just don't think that's right. Like, Sam's deck, I think, I could just look at it as an overwhelming advantage against any Dreadnought plan. But it could just be run over by most of the red aggro. It could be run over by elves. Right, like I think these are situations where what you were saying earlier, Lanny, that Sam doesn't have portents to fix his hand early on. Like, his opponent's just like elf survival of the fittest. You just easily lose the game on the 3rd turn. That seems very possible to me. Is that wrong, Sam? Like, you have 2 Wrath of God.
In the tournament, I did beat mono red and I did beat elves.
But you could lose to being super out tempoed if they're like 1-drop, 2-drop, 2-2-drop.
It is possible, but again, I think that like the fact that I'm on Swords foil as my early interaction makes that less likely than it would be if I were like a different blue-eye control deck.
Yeah, like the blue-eye control deck with counter spells in the situation you described, Mike, is like 0% because they won't be able to answer survival. Sam's deck could plausibly answer survival, turn 2 on the draw type situation. I wanted to kind of like, ask a question about like what, this thing that I've been thinking on and that I'd experienced when I've, because generally if Sam makes a deck, I try it out. I want to see what it's about. And then I find out that I don't understand control, and I just like go back to doing this other thing that I'm used to doing. And
Just grow a talk again.
Well, I actually did find this out when I was sort of annoyed at how hard it was to build a control deck in like the Vintage Cube, which like it kind of got me to this place of like, pre-modern people talk about the hallmark of the era just being like the answers are so much more efficient than the threats, mostly just sword splashers, counterspell type stuff. And I kind of almost felt like, wait a second, like I don't actually think this is necessarily like true in the way that people explaining that dynamic, or if you hear that statement, what you might assume, because I'm like, well, a creature is an incredible thing in pre-modern. Like, an elephant token is capable of doing so much. Like, it can stop a goblin army, it can reduce your opponent's life total to 0, and then sometimes I guess it sacrifices to Cabal Therapy or whatever, and then, whatever. If you happen to have 2 elephant tokens, you can stand off a 4/4 or whatnot. So I kind of don't know exactly where I'm going with this, but like I have noticed a trend where way back when you built the domain deck and I played it, and my feedback was I prefer Ravenous Baloth as my win condition than Haunting Echoes, because I want to block sometimes. So I guess my question to Sam is like, when you build these decks, like, do you think that why not block? Why not?
This is a great segue into the thing that I've been meaning to talk about.
Okay.
Which is the one change that I'm considering for this deck is -1 something +1 Nether Spirit.
Okay, yeah. I love it. That's actually so good. You can get it with intuition. You can get it with foil.
Well, if you get it with intuition, they just put it in your hand.
Yeah, they'll put it in your hand, obviously.
You just foil with it. It's no
you
big
foil
deal.
with it, yeah.
Yeah, your plan is foil with it or hit it off Act or Fiction.
Okay. So that's your answer to my question. But
the answer is I am very seriously considering 1 Nether Spirit. I think that the 1 Nether Spirit would help a lot against goblins and like every black deck. And I think that it makes you like a little bit worse against decks with Sword Splashers because it turns on their first Sword Splashers instead of like their.
But it's not a big deal, right?
Oh no, it's not a big deal at all.
Yeah, the card that you pitched to foil instead would have also traded with their 1 Sword Splashers.
Okay.
I guess it depends how the Nether Spirit gets into play, but like it's just not a big deal. It just gives them like some amount of
and at that point you gain 2 life, which is pretty
it's
exciting.
+1 card. It's like not +1 card relative to 7, right? When you're just like, oh, +1 card relative to 7 is a big deal, but +1 card relative to 46 is like not a big deal. Like that's the math on the Nether Spirit.
Okay, so like let's say 3 months from now, you're still playing this deck, you're still having a lot of fun with it, it's still winning, but I guess this question doesn't work unless I say right now. So like right now you're playing this deck, you won a tournament, you feel pretty good about it. This is kind of like this is going to be the Sam deck for the right now. How stupid are people not to give this a try?
Oh, this is a Sam deck. There are a lot of reasons that it might not be right for you, listener, or whoever, to play this deck. Not winning or not finishing rounds is a very real consideration, and this is the kind of thing where you really do need to make sure that you know how to choose when to cast Gaia's Blessing, what to return with it, when to cast Abeyance, what to take off your Fact or Fiction, what your intuition's doing, when to like plan to hard cast Gush versus pick up 2 lands. And the answer is not, well, if I have 10 lands in play, I'm always hard casting Gush. Sometimes you want to pick up 2 lands so that you have like more lands in your hand to like discard to foil or shuffle in with Scroll Rack. Like the deck is, you know, built for me to play, and if this is not your kind of deck, this is probably not a good entry point into this kind of deck if you're trying to like win the tournament that you're signing up for.
Okay. Thank you for listing a bunch of easy follow-up questions for me. One, Gaia's Blessing. This is a card that is interesting to play, and I did find with your green-white Scroll Rack deck, I would be in a place where I'm just kind of like, is this the point where I want more mulches in my deck or whatever? So do you feel like do you have any helpful heuristics or tips that you use when casting Gaia's Blessing to at least shorten the amount of time it takes you to make the decision?
So I guess like my deck, like the starting point is the deck is like somewhat well-rounded, and when you're using your Gaia's Blessing, you kind of need to keep it a little bit well-rounded, right? Like you don't always want to just go like 4 Fact or Fiction or 3 Fact or Fictions back in the deck. Sometimes you want to go like 1 Fact or Fiction, 1 Island, 1 Sword Splashers. And like you want to, you know, make sure that you're like adding to your velocity, but you also want to make sure that you still like have like relevant things that impact the board that you're like continuing to hit. You want to make sure that you can still hit your land drops or like have a thing to discard to foil if you're at a stage in the game where that might happen. The answer, you often want to do a mix of things, and it's kind of about tuning your deck to be what it needs to be in the moment, is maybe, no, actually, it's harder than you think.
Sam, do you know the story of I made the standard Boros deck in like end of Ravnica block, and it was like placing in a bunch of Grand Prix. It like did pretty well. People were making fun of it because I had Boros Garrison, and people were calling it budget Boros. But it was really good, right? So Patrick Sullivan's playing it on MTGO, not MTGA at the time, and I had Volcanic Hammer in my deck, and he insisted on putting Leon and Sky Knight in that slot. And so I'm like, no, you got to have Volcanic
Sky Knight
Hammer.
is the 2/2 haste.
2/2
Yeah,
flyer.
no,
2/2 flying.
Yeah.
No. No.
2/2 flying for white.
For white. He put
yeah.
instead of Volcanic Hammer, which costs R1 in a deck with Boros Garrison. So we're like, I can settle this. So we're at the Pro Tour, and we go up to Tsuyoshi Fujita. We get down on our knees, and we're like, Master Fujita, do you approve of the Boros deck? Because yeah, it's an excellent deck. I was like, okay, which is right? And I hold up a Volcanic Hammer, and Patrick Sullivan holds up a Leon and Sky Knight, and he like rubs a Fu Manchu beard that he doesn't have, right? And it's just there. He's just like being this like ancient Chinese guru on top of a mountain, despite being Japanese. He looks over and he goes, depends on the meta game. That's what Sam just said. Sam, what are some heuristics? Depends on the situation.
Well, I think a no-brainer is to shuffle Gaia's Blessing with Gaia's Blessing. So the question really is which 2 other cards that you want to put back.
Well, except that this isn't even a situation where like in the late game there's always a Gaia's Blessing in the graveyard, because like your Gaia's Blessing trigger resets all of them.
Yeah, assuming that you don't have a Gaia's Blessing, I would assume that like if you're short on time, a quick shortcut is to grab the first Gaia's Blessing if available, then proceed. The second thing that I thought was kind of interesting was this sort of gush timing question, which, I've kind of given the heuristic or there's a few gush heuristics. There's a book on it. But there's a few short ones, like don't cast it picking up islands on your end step, float mana, make your land
People
drop.
do that all the time.
Yeah, I know.
All the time.
It's It needs to stop. It's just like a good magic heuristic. Don't do anything for free on your end step unless you have like a very
I
obvious
assume you
reason to
mean
do
the
it.
opponent's end step.
Yeah, the opponent's end step, but also gushing on your own end step would be pretty bad. But yeah, like if you have, Mana was on the podcast and we were joking about people who strip mine on end step being, a hilarious blunder. But many such cases,
Right. I do want to say, unlike end step strip mine, there are spots where it can be right to end of your opponent's turn pick up 2 islands to gush. Specifically, if you're like hoping to hit a fact or fiction off of it.
right. If you can plausibly do something with the mana, there's a reason to. And of course, the most common one is if you're digging for foil or counterspell because your opponent casts a spell that you're trying to
foil with those 2 islands.
Yeah. But I was curious if anything came up while you were playing this deck where you were just like, oh, maybe I should like play Gush differently than I would think here. I think the one that you mentioned was like just not casting Gush, which I think is like the most powerful one, which is like if you have Gush in your hand and foil and you're not interested in, making anything change about the game in the next few turns, just like keep those cards next
I
to
don't
each other.
cast Gush all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Don't cast Gush just because you have it or just because you have the mana to cast it. Although, I mean, I will say that like that would be somewhat counterintuitive. Is like if you end the turn, it's your opponent's end step, you have 5 mana, you have Gush in your hand, you're just like, oh well, what else am I doing? But
Sam, you're saying that in that situation that Landy's describing, you have 5 open mana. You don't just hard cast a Gush if you have like 5 cards in hand.
It depends on the
that,
matchup.
right?
Well, even then, it depends on the matchup, right? Like, if this is a matchup where if I hard cast the Gush, I'm likely to get to a point in 3 turns where I'm going to have to discard, then it's like better to just like have the Gush in my hand as like this 1 slot in my hand is 2 slots in my hand, unless I'm in a spot where like I already have like a Library of Lang in my deck that I'm drawing to.
I actually want to say right now that the thing that Sam just said is so important, and people should like rewind this 30 seconds and listen to it again, because Sam just said, if I'm in a position 3 turns from now that I might have to discard, and then he continued his sentence. Like
people don't think about that. They only do the math of like, if I'm going to have 8 on my next end step instead of 3 end steps from now.
I was thinking about doing some coaching like 2 years ago, and I coached Rebel or whatever, but then this guy offered to coach me. So I watched a bunch of his videos, and then I sent him like a deck of like why he lost all these games. And like most of them came down to, dude, you don't play for the future. You're constantly doing stuff right now, and then you're like missing card advantage 2 turns in the future. They just don't even think about like that there might be 2 turns from now. But Sam only thinks about there might be 2 turns.
Well, that's the only place that's, I mean, it's kind of pulls up the sort of like amorphous other thing of just like, is your deck constructed to have a predictable future is, one of those things. So like one of the problems with playing for the present, like, oh, should I trade this card? Should I play this land, spend all my mana type questions is just that like, okay, well, what's going to happen next turn? Like, is my opponent going to play a creature? If they play a creature, like, what is my deck going to do about it? I think the less predictable your deck is at delivering you certain cards, the less difficult like that your ability to play for the future becomes. And as a result, you kind of have to make, judgment calls or gambles, basically. And I think when you make your deck 75 cards that are all interested in extending the game for the absolute maximum amount of time, you're like, your ability to know what's going to happen the next few turns, when you have a full grip and you have a lot of control over what's happening over the game is much different. So, or of course you are a burn player and you have 0 cards in hand, but you have a pretty strong idea of the contents of your deck. And also you just have no choice.
Does the same thing.
Yeah. Or you have no choice but to try to win the game or else lose the game. The other thing you mentioned was using intuition. I think that this would be, if you have any tips for people, I think intuition is kind of like a weird card where outside of using it to string together certain combos, like a lot of replenished players will be like in weird spots in the game where maybe it's correct to just be like, oh, 1 Seal of Cleansing, 1 Parallax Wave, and 1 attunement, and then that kind of stuff. What are what are examples of intuitions that, aren't triple
Right.
spell I need right now and aren't like deep
Well,
analysis
so
in
I
the
think
art or
triple
guys
spell I
blessing
need
in the
right
art.
now is like basically, what I'm trying to do with intuition is largely hold on to it for like in the early game, and then like if I have to, like if there's, oh, I absolutely have to plow this or I absolutely have to counter this, you get 3 plows or you get 3 foils. But you really need to pay attention with a deck like this where you have so much card draw to like the fact that intuition is taking, the card that you want, it's making it so that you won't draw those in the future, right? Like you're selling out your future to get it now. You can fix that later with the Gaia's blessing, but for a while you're just not going to have more access to the thing that is most important. And so like there can be a temptation to be like, okay, I'm like stable, I want to pull ahead, so I'm just going to intuition for 3 factor fictions.
Right.
And like you can do that and you can like hope that, you'll like hit a blessing or whatever and get the factor fictions back in your deck. But there are spots where like the one time in the tournament that I cast like that sort of intuition where it's just like I just want to pull ahead here. I intuitioned for gush deep analysis rather than going for factor fictions because I wanted to keep the factor fictions in my deck. Um, and like getting the deep analysis meant like, oh, I'm gonna get plenty of cards off of this intuition, so I don't need a factor fiction here. I want to just play like draw twos into my factor fictions.
Sam, what
Um,
life gain is in your deck? Just the absorb?
Main deck the absorb, and then sideboard I have a Zern Orb and a warmth.
Okay.
So
Because I'm
talk to
just
me
wondering
about.
about like how often you want to do stuff like intuition for the deep analysis when you have multiple deep
Well, so
analysis.
there's also only one deep analysis in the deck.
But don't you
In
have
the
more
main
in your sideboard?
I have more in the sideboard, but the idea is that they mostly come up in matchups like against blue decks where my life total is not really under pressure. The only exception to that is they also come in against like black discard
Black
decks.
decks, yeah.
Um, Against the discard decks, the plan is side out your counter spells for like card draw and masticore.
Right.
And or of silence and disenchant. Um, I don't know if it's obvious that like you want to just cut all your counter spells, but
It's not like immediately obvious, but because your counter spells are the card foil and your opponent, has discard spells, it does
yeah, I
definitely
mean, just
doesn't
in
look as
general,
good.
counter spells
Yeah.
aren't great against discard spells, and
Yeah,
card draw
yeah.
is great against discard spells.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, and like once you have like disenchants, like there's nothing the black deck is going to resolve that you can't answer. So you just like let them resolve whatever they want and just like beat them on card draw.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. Which would kind of beg for a black deck to like kind of figure out if they should play some sort of protection from white win condition against Sam's deck, or just in general. I did get into a discussion with Andy
You start
Levine
wrapping out
about.
Mastercore for that situation.
Yeah, yeah, of course you do. But I mean, if if you want to find an angle, I think that maybe your card is Esan's Shade and your other card is Diabolic Edict. So if you have no counter spells, all of a sudden that's a plan. But yeah, maybe an order and a pump night can get to business. I was going to ask if you were in spots where you're like, I am simply not going to flash back this deep analysis because I plan on casting the front half forever, or if you have enough not deep
hard
analysis.
to really like get into a spot where that matters because like you can
Yeah.
just bless back the gushes instead. Like if the like draw two on the deep analysis were more load bearing, I could imagine that, but you just have so many other card draw spells that you're happy to just cash it in from your graveyard if your life total's not in jeopardy.
Zooming out slightly, if I were to build a deck that contained the card Guy's Blessing, how much would I avoid playing flashback cards like Revelation or Grizzly Fate, or how much would I not care very much about them because I can still bless them and still cast the front end?
It is a consideration. I think that like if your deck has Gaia's Blessing, it becomes a lot more reasonable to consider like maybe I want Aura Blast instead of Rave Revelation. But it kind of depends on like you just have to like imagine like in the matchups where this is what I'm doing, like do I need two of this right now, or do I need like this over and over in a very long time to be the thing that like lets me win this matchup? So like if you're just trying to like keep your opponent off of survival, then you probably just need this twice. Whereas if you're like saying I just want to be better at like killing whatever enchantress plays, then it might be better to just be like, and now I loot my like aura my
Or a
aura
blast.
blast.
Or dismantling blow. I mean, come on, Sam. Give
Well,
Mike something here.
aura blast is much more mana efficient. 4 additional mana for 1 additional card is like not where you want to be. Um, Generally, you want to be at like
But
2 additional mana for.
you can target artifacts with dismantling blow.
Yeah, but I was talking about, you're trying to
Yeah,
optimize
Ray of
for
Revelation.
finding an
Okay.
enchantress.
The Hardcast recently stated, or Billy himself recently stated, that you would do much better in the pre-modern format if you were not fixated on Gaia's Blessing. What are your responses to those comments?
One would be, or I would be.
You would be. Specifically, Sam Black would be.
Oh. Do they think that I would be better served by spending my time playing formats other than pre-modern?
Also, no.
Well, I'm confused. It seems like the thing that would be best accomplished if I were to stop playing Gaia's Blessing in pre-modern is that I would just play other formats.
Okay.
No,
Good answer.
don't do that.
No, Sam, don't do it. The very first paragraph of your primer takes a shot at certain content creators who say that Mox Diamond is like not a good card. Walk me through well, I guess let's just lay the groundwork. My argument is card is bad, costs you a land, you end up missing your land drops, which is, again, something I got from your CEDH or just EDH deck building philosophy about missing land drops and playing ramp. Really hard in pre-modern to tap all your lands all the time if you're just discarding a card. Plus, all these Mox Diamond decks kind of suck. The best one right now is Oath Ponza, and that's kind of like, just an okay deck. I say this in the context of people saying that the card is like plausibly ban worthy, or that it would have made more sense to ban Mox Diamond instead of land tax. So that's kind of what frames my argument. In your primer, you talk about how Mox Diamond's just a very powerful card. You just have to do all of these things to make it a powerful card, to which I would respond, I feel like I don't disagree with that point. But I was curious if your idea of like how powerful a card could be, because you're fixated on Gaia's Blessing, you're also generally trying to fit Mox Diamond into these decks. What have I not talked about that or what am I not giving enough credit to?
I mean, I agree that all of the concerns that you brought up are like things that you have to address in like making Mox Diamond good, and I think that each of them individually was addressed in the deck we've been talking about.
Right.
I just think that like the effect, both be up a permanent mana source and have real fixing in a format where both of those things are very hard to come by, is above replacement, right? Like there are lots of cards in pre-modern that do similar things, and Mox Diamond does a thing that is different than what all of those do. And if you can actually take advantage of that, you're, a turn and smooth mana ahead of your opponents in a lot of ways. And I guess it's just like, if my goal is to just like feel like I'm playing a different format than my opponent, the way that I was talking about like how, the way this deck uses mana feels more like a legacy deck than a pre-modern deck. Like you need, a card like Mox Diamond to get access to that kind of thing. There are other cards, like Lackey, when it works, gives you that kind of experience, but also we're talking about connecting with a 1-mana 1/1 in a format where people know that they should not let that happen. And Mox Diamond is a card that's very hard to it's very hard to stop Mox Diamond from doing its thing. Like it costs no mana, and if you counter it, you're not even 2-for-1ing them.
I mean, I guess I would say it's hard to stop it from doing its thing, but its thing is obviously much less immediately impactful than Goblin Lackey's thing, for instance, or Phyrexian Dreadnought's thing, right?
Sure.
So like the fact that removal interacts with those cards is,
right, but
appropriate.
like the way that I'm trying to build decks or approach Magic is to like minimize exploitability and bad matchups and like do things that are consistently like just generate a consistent experience for myself. Like Goblin Lackey has very, very large power level swings within a game. Whereas like the Mox Diamond experience is you go up a predictable resource every time you do this thing. And that lets me like build my deck and my game plan in a way where it's like, okay, I account for the costs, I get the benefit. The benefit informs my deck building and informs my strategy, and I get to like cash in on the advantage that this offered. Um, where like the lackey is like, I'm gonna roll some people over some games, and I'm gonna have some like overcosted goblins that I can't put onto the battlefield in some other games.
So,
Um,
so talk to me a little bit, because I guess it's a little bit tricky to say that that kind of has to do with deck building, because obviously you would build your goblins deck with goblin lackey, and you're kind of saying like I wouldn't begin to build the goblins deck, because the goblins deck doesn't create this kind of, it doesn't satisfy these sort of objectives, but you do build decks that plausibly don't contain Gaia's blessing. Your Mox field is filled with kind of like these ideas. So do you like when you build decks, like when you build conceivably a beatdown deck or as close to a beatdown deck that Sam might like, do you feel like you are discarding some of those fundamentals of like, oh, I want to, play these sort of predictable, reliable cards or cards that have a high floor type thing, or like,
no. So like basically, my deck building is predicated on the conceit that I'm better at Magic than my average opponent, and that I want less variance in a game rather than more, and that in general, like more turns happening is good for me, more like ability for cards to like interact with each other is good for me. Um, and like this also like radically informs like my approach to like CDH deck selection and deck building. And like, you know, to give an example from that format, massive apologies to the pre-modern player base listening to
oh,
this.
I'm about to ruin their lives by my analogy, but go ahead.
So there's a card called
Wait, are
Flare.
we a pro analogy podcast again?
Yeah, we've always been a pro analogy
Oh, we've
podcast.
always been.
Yeah.
There's a card called Flare of Duplication, which is fork, except it costs an extra red, and you can cast it for free by sacrificing a red creature. This is a very, very, very powerful effect, because it copies any spell for free, or instant or sorcery. And I don't play this in my deck that has a free red creature in the command zone, meaning that the flare is just like always on, and I have a bunch of like really powerful sorceries to copy, like Finale of Devastation that just like puts a creature into play, and I could put two creatures into play instead, which is usually game winning in my creature combo deck. I don't play it because if the like if the original spell is countered, the fork fizzles, and I
3 for 1,
like
3-ish.
myself.
Yeah.
And I never want to expose myself to that kind of risk.
Yeah,
So
you don't want to
even
get
if-
dream bladed.
right, like the power level, the power level spike is such that like on average this is a good card, but I don't want to introduce the swings.
It's actually kind of funny because people like to say win more, and this is kind of an evolved version of that argument. I guess the win more argument is that the first copy of your spell is good enough, but so that's maybe is not necessarily true. It's more just like opening up these like lines of variance. But
yeah, this is different than that.
Yeah.
But like basically, like a lot of people approach CDH, especially because it's a 4-player game,
that has
like,
lots of variance. Yeah.
right, being like I need to get lucky to win a game. Like I'm winning, theoretically around 25% of my games. So I want to like introduce a lot of variance, get power level spikes so that when I have an above average draw, I can convert that into a win. I have played a lot of tournaments in the last year. and I have won just over 50% of the like games that I've played, and that's counting like draws as games that I've played. And this is across 27 tournaments. Like I have a record in CDH of 69, 50, and 17
Nice.
um, in a four-player format.
Right.
And so my approach is not I need to give myself some power level spikes to like beat three other players. My approach is if nothing goes wrong, I'm going to win. Um, and that is just like also how I try to build my decks for brute modern. Um,
What happens when you do play against somebody who is maybe as good as you are? Or like what? Or I guess, yeah. Okay, there you go. Good answer.
I mean, like the answer is that I'm, optimizing to win as many of the matches in the tournaments that I'm playing as I can. And if I play against another good player, then I still have a consistent deck rather than having like a swingier deck.
So if I was
much.
if I was skeptical of this, I might say like, okay, well, why don't you just like have your deck have, like because you have such an advantage in putting the game into this sort of like decisions matter or like navigation matters types of game, like, would you not still benefit from the types of cards that, even if they don't work out, even if you do get 3-for-1 because your opponent has some kind of interaction or has something that you can't account for with your skill, like that's okay because you can take that loss of resources or that loss of equity and still kind of convert the game.
What you're saying is if I have a whole bunch of cards that are like flip a coin, if you win the coin flip, draw 4 cards, like shouldn't I just play a lot of those instead of divinations because I'll win some of the coin flips?
No, no, it's more so like if you kind of start if you like are 56 cards into your deck and your last 4 cards basically sort of push more in the direction of like super hyper consistency, like reliability, like, well, it's only the last 4 cards or maybe the last 2 cards, like we could just throw something that's kind of swingy in there because the first 58 cards are going to do their job, and then maybe sometimes we're just gonna off the top rope windmill slam people with our
are
like
you just advocating for
variance
fun?
card. No, I'm advocating for I'm like literally like I want like if I'm in this world, I'm in like Sam's world, and basically like maybe I'm not sure how well this analogy will hold up, but it's like, okay, well, we've got 58 cards, they're great cards, and our last 2 cards are going to be like cards that draw more cards, but instead of that we are going to add in 2 cards that have like this literally happened with the deck, right? There's 2 Armageddons in this deck, and then he just changed it for more card draw, right? Why not leave in the 2 Armageddons? Because you might just get in somebody out, and in fact, you might find yourself in spots where Armageddon is going to solve the problem better than a Fact or Fiction. Like I think it's like
right. I think it's reasonable to have 1 Armageddon in the 75. I think 2 is more than this deck wants and is a holdover from I liked the white cards in the green-white deck that needed Armageddon for a certain function that this deck doesn't need it for.
Yeah.
I obviously decided to cut it because I think that I want to cast it in a minority of games, and having the card that I don't want to cast is going to like hurt me more than I think that my win rate is going to be higher if I just have more of like my good cards instead of a card that I sometimes want. In terms of like
he's just raising the floor instead of raising the ceiling, right? That's kind of what you're saying, Sam.
Essentially.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the problem with this the problem with this line of discussion, right, is just that the way that cards behave, they don't simply, there's not like there's cards that are like more variance cards, like there are cards that have high floors and high ceilings.
Right. Well, like, that's why I went to like, are you saying I should just play a bunch of copies of Flip a Coin if you win the flip draw 4? Where
well, I don't think that's like I think that's like too reductive, right? Like I think a more obvious example is like a card like Oath of Druids, right, which has like a conceivably quite low floor, but like one of the power of many Oath of Druids decks is that the thing that they do when Oath of Druids is not triggering is like still really, really good in lots of matchups, and you can win matchups. You can win matchups boarding out.
I think Oath of Druids is a fantastic explanation And or is like a fantastic card to bring up. And the reason I think it's such a fantastic card to bring up is that I never play Oath of Druids, and everyone else plays that look just like mine but have Oath of Druids.
Exactly.
And I don't play Oath of Druids because Oath of Druids is terrible against me. And
so God forbid somebody net decks Sam.
Well, no, I don't want to have Oath of Druids against a deck that Oath of Druids is bad against. And I know that like a lot of the decks I personally respect in the format are decks Oath of Druids is bad against. And I don't feel like I need Oath of Druids to beat the decks that it beats. And I just feel like there are other ways to do that. And I just really don't want to be on the wrong end of like
Oath of Druids in your hand with no creatures.
I not only have this card that's bad in this matchup, but I radically built my deck around this card that's bad in this matchup.
Oh yeah, I mean, let's not get like too excited here because you were already going to put three guys blessings in, so that significantly reduces the load of playing Oath of Druids versus like a deck that doesn't have guys blessing. But I understand what you're saying.
Scenario, it's 6 bad cards.
It's 6 slots. Yeah, it's 6 slots. I mean, 6 is
an enormous number of slots. That's like all of my stoppers.
Hear me out. I think it's 5 because Shard Phoenix is like a totally competent win condition in the place of Decree of Justice. So
strong disagree.
I think that your analogy is like picking Arid Mesa over Black Lotus because you believe that you're so powerful in draft that you don't need the swinginess that comes with Black Lotus and would rather take the reliability that comes with Arid Mesa.
I mean, there's a lot of situations where you'd rather have Arid Mesa than Black Lotus. Like, Arid Mesa is a permanent and Black Lotus is a dark ritual.
I think that the slippery slope that you're like alleging I'm falling into
I did not allege anything. I just said that you could plausibly that if you were some kind of maniac on the internet.
You're right that taken to its extreme, you could get this kind of conclusion. But I'm not saying that I want, to fill my deck with all lightning bolts because I know what lightning bolt does. I'm, like saying that this is a pressure that I am choosing to pay attention to in deck building. But that's not saying that it trumps all other considerations or, can be taken to its logical extreme, and I will apply it to like whatever you want to say is at the end of this slippery slope.
Right. No, I'm not advocating that it's a slippery slope. I'm actually just bringing it up because, my final analogy that's horrible for this is that Phil Hellmuth would be like at poker tables and he'd be like, I'd fold aces. I would fold aces because I knew I would just crush them, So, you'd just be in a spot. You have the best hand in poker and somebody just makes a big move and you're like, screw it, I'm just going to fold because I know that I'm going to get them in the next. That's that same kind of mentality. I do need to wrap things up here. I have obviously tons and tons more to talk about, but alas, we are already 2 hours in and it is a school night. Is there anything I'm loving this. I really hope that somebody can kind of like study the blade on this deck and that there might be like one other person that can like play it, operate it, not go to time so that, there would be more data that this doesn't become just like this thing. Cause the worst thing about
and bring it to, I just don't think and I'm the fastest player at League by far. I'm done first no matter what deck I play. I don't think that I could finish around at League. I played 23 in League at one time, and I only won games because my opponents conceded to me. And 23andB has more win conditions than this.
Is this not a deck that you think that like SWB or Rich could play?
I think play it. You can't finish the round.
I think that Rich could play it, and it would be interesting to see if how he felt about it. He does love a little guy's blessing and Mox Diamond. These are all cards I love, but I would just be like boarding in for Meddling Mage every single match, just every single time.
That's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. But I would just be boarding in them so hard that I would forget to sideboard in between rounds. I'm like, whoop! I guess we're a Meddling Mage deck. I might throw a few Quirion Rangers in there. I don't know. I don't know how they ended up there, but they're there.
Anyway, Mike, just play the Nether Spirit.
Oh, the Nether Spirit sounds great.
I'm just thinking back, like,
But you
how have I
can't
ever
play the
watched
Nether Spirit
SWV
over the
in
Decree of
past?
Justice, which is like a little awkward. I mean, you can, but like if you do, you're insane.
Wait, what?
First of all, to be clear, I'm insane. What if I just cut like the fourth gush, like that just came in for the Armageddon?
Oh,
I'm
my
definitely playing an Armageddon, Sam. Like there's people who are just gonna walk into the Armageddon. They're begging
what?
for it.
Mike
Yeah, begging for
Mike needs the variance. He needs the
I-
flair
The
of
fourth,
duplication.
the fourth gush is what I was going to cut for the Nether Spirit. But I mean, if you want, you could cut the fourth gush and the fourth Factor Fiction and play another Spirit and get.
Actually,
I'm fine with the fourth Factor Fiction because I think like I'm super like I've never played your deck, Sam, but I already feel the vibe of your deck. Like I understand how to work people with the Factor Fiction to win the game and like all the little angles that may or may not be good, but have a good outcome because in part I felt more clever than my opponent. I'm super in for all those aspects of this deck, and there are many, right?
Sure.
all right,
Every
well,
time you're like, oh, well, I had a Flooded Strand and a Plains on turn one, so I know the timing rules. What do you think about that, Mr. Man? Like, I'm down for every one of those 2-for-1s. Like, I'm down for my opponent thinking that he's got me and casting a Factor Fiction, flipping over a guy's blessing and be like, listen, man, give me a 0-5 and see what happens. I'm in for that, right?
well,
I just
stay
don't think I can
tuned.
finish the round.
Stay tuned for the next episode of Spike Colony, where we will discuss Mike's 0, 1, and 2 finish at League.
Okay, I'm
Sam,
playing the Rock again. I had too much fun playing the Rock, but I'm gonna make Sam's deck. I'll have both decks in my bag, in case I get paired against a deck that the Rock can't beat, which is most of them. I went 2-1 last week. I lost to Wyatt.
uh,
By the way, I have some fun brews in my Mox field in the last couple of days.
yeah, I guess we'll have to have you back on, just to talk about the brews.
Tim, do you
Or
still
we'll
play
just like,
Standard
or we'll
at
just
all?
put you. Okay, so we're gonna put Sam in the Bougie Discord, and that's going to bait people.
You're just
into,
putting him in the Bougie Discord.
I don't
You
know.
just
I
want
guess
him
I
in the
could
Bougie
ask him
Discord.
for. I guess I could ask
I don't
him
know
for
about that, man.
$5.
So I think everyone else in the Bougie Discord would be like, look, I like having Sam Black here. This is a value add, but yo.
Yeah, there's rules. I mean, I get technically the Bougie Discord, the minimum entry is handing me an unglued land because that is how a few members of the
Sam.
Bougie Discords have gotten in there.
To answer
do
your
you like
standard
Avatar?
question, to answer your standard question, I don't like actively play standard, but I did put Badgermole Cub in my CDH deck, and it was so good that it inspired me to build a standard deck that I played one match today with.
Oh my god, I am so excited to play standard, and I haven't played standard in like 6 months. And I used to play like 15 to 30 games.
You
of standard a
you
day.
can invite Sam onto the Top Level podcast. Listen to Sam's new podcast if you like CEDH. If you are in the Wisconsin area, or I guess plausibly signing up for Discord, you can talk to Sam or at Sam about his decks. Love Spike Colony. Sam, do you have anything?
Let me jump in here. I did this podcast. Let me jump in for my own plug.
Yeah.
So his podcast, for those who don't know, which is likely most of you, is Sam's Table. And while it is primarily a CDH podcast, I have recorded an episode already that was about old cards, talking about modern and old school with Zach Hill. And I do intend to periodically discuss non-CDH formats, primarily pre-modern and some old school.
Right. So like and subscribe and subscribe on YouTube, where all you sickos are listening to podcasts, to Sam's Table and Love Spy Colony. Any other plugs that don't relate to standard?
I found this in a pile of cards. This is like $100.
All right.
Yeah.
Sell it for some pre-modern cards. If anybody's in the market for a foil Quantum
Am I wrong?
Riddler.
This is like an in-print card. It's like $60. This one's foil.
Love Spy Colony.